The morning sun spilled across the quiet Pennsylvania countryside, gilding the old wooden church in a soft, golden light. Inside, laughter and hurried footsteps echoed through the narrow halls as guests found their seats. Bouquets rustled, and the air filled with the scent of lilacs and perfume. It was the kind of morning that promised perfection, the kind of day every mother dreams her daughter will have. Emily Carter stood before the mirror in the bride's room, her hands trembling slightly as she adjusted her veil. Her reflection smiled back, nervous, radiant, and uncertain all at once. "You look beautiful," her mother said softly from behind, voice low and syrupy with pride. Linda Carter had tears in her eyes, but her expression held something else, a heaviness, almost like longing. She brushed a loose strand of hair from Emily's face, her fingers lingering longer than they should have. "I can't believe it's really happening," Emily whispered. Linda smiled, though the corners of her lips didn't quite lift. "I can," she said. "You've always had a way of getting what you want." Her tone carried a strange edge, not bitter, not kind, just heavy. Emily turned, sensing the shift, but before she could ask, the door opened. Daniel Hayes stepped in, breaking every tradition that warned the groom should never see the bride before the ceremony. He looked calm, almost too calm, dressed in black with a pale rose pinned to his lapel. His eyes flicked toward Emily, and then, fleetingly, to Linda. Something unspoken passed between them. "Sorry," Daniel said quickly, clearing his throat. "Just wanted to make sure everything's okay. They're ready to start." Emily smiled nervously, reaching for his hand. "We're okay," she said, but Daniel didn't meet her eyes. He nodded and turned to leave, brushing past Linda as he did. Her gaze followed him, lingering, soft, intimate. The organ music began to swell. Outside, guests rose to their feet. The aisle shimmered under strands of fairy lights, and whispers filled the pews as Emily appeared, glowing in white. Linda stood just behind her, clutching her bouquet so tightly her knuckles whitened. Every step her daughter took toward Daniel seemed to pull something taut inside her. A string wound too tightly, ready to snap. The ceremony unfolded perfectly. Vows exchanged, rings slipped into trembling hands, laughter and applause echoing under the high wooden beams. And yet, beneath the beauty, the narrator's voice cut through the warmth like a chill. Everyone saw love that day except for the kind that mattered, because love, in its darkest form, had already chosen its side. When the guests clapped and the couple kissed, Linda smiled too, the smile of a woman hiding a storm. As the music swelled and confetti rained down, her eyes found Daniel's once more. He looked away, and in that quiet, fleeting glance, the perfect day began to crumble. The applause from the ceremony faded into the echo of memories. Memories that never quite left the Carter home. As Emily and Daniel posed for pictures under the white canopy, Linda stood a few feet away, smiling for the camera, her mind drifting backward. The past had a way of intruding when she least expected it. 3 years earlier, their house had felt like a mausoleum after Richard Carter's funeral. He had been quiet, patient, and predictable, the kind of man whose absence was louder than his presence had ever been. Linda remembered sitting in the living room night after night, the ticking clock filling the silence, the smell of his cologne still trapped in the curtains. Emily had been her only reason to keep moving, but dependence had its own poison. "Mom, you can't call me every hour," Emily had once said gently, packing her bag for college. "I'll be fine." Linda had smiled too tightly. "You're all I have left." What began as closeness turned into possession. When Emily met Daniel at a charity event 2 years later, Linda had been skeptical at first. Not because he seemed unworthy, but because he was taking her place. Daniel was warm, attentive, and disarmingly polite. He brought flowers when he visited and always called Linda Mrs. Carter, even when she told him not to. At first, she admired him the way a mother would. But admiration is a fragile border, and somewhere between shared dinners and late-night wedding plans, Linda crossed it. It started subtly, a hand brushing his sleeve when passing dishes, lingering eye contact when Emily wasn't looking. One evening, when Daniel came over to fix the broken garden lights, Linda brought out 2 glasses of wine. "You shouldn't be out here alone," she told him, sitting close enough for their knees to touch. Daniel laughed nervously. "I don't think Emily would appreciate this view being wasted." "She's lucky," Linda replied. Her tone was low, playful, dangerous. The silence that followed was heavy. He didn't move away. In the weeks that followed, their conversations grew personal. She told him about her loneliness, about how everyone treated her like she'd stopped existing after Richard's death. Daniel listened, guilt softening into sympathy, sympathy into confusion. Once, during a thunderstorm, he stayed longer than usual, claiming it wasn't safe to drive home. They sat on the couch, the sound of rain filling the room. When she reached for his hand, neither spoke. It was a quiet betrayal, one that neither of them fully admitted, even to themselves. Emily never suspected a thing. She was busy with work, wedding plans, and the idea of a future she believed her mother was proud of. But Linda's smiles were masks stretched over jealousy. Each time Emily mentioned our new life, Linda felt something inside her splinter a little more. At the engagement dinner, Daniel toasted to the woman who raised the love of my life. Everyone clapped. Linda laughed, but her eyes glistened for the wrong reason. The cracks in the Carter family didn't appear overnight. They had been there all along, hidden under politeness and habit. Now, with Daniel at the center of both women's worlds, those cracks began to widen. As the night of the wedding drew closer, Linda found herself avoiding mirrors. She could no longer recognize the woman looking back. Not the widow, not the mother, not even the bride's proud parent. Only a woman terrified of being forgotten. And when Daniel knocked on her door again, this time under the excuse of dropping off invitations, she didn't hesitate to let him in. Daniel told himself it was harmless, just helping his future mother-in-law finalize a few wedding details. That was how it always started. A text here, a call there, a polite offer to drop by, since Emily was stuck late at work. But every time he arrived at Linda's house, he stayed longer than he meant to. At first, the visits were innocent. They planned seating charts, tasted cakes, compared color themes. Linda always dressed casually, but there was something deliberate in the way her perfume lingered, in the soft music that hummed through the house. She laughed more when Daniel was around. A low, musical sound that made the air feel heavy. "Emily's lucky," she told him one afternoon as they sorted through invitation cards. "You remind me of Richard in some ways. Kind eyes, calm voice. He used to make me feel safe." Daniel smiled awkwardly. "I'm not sure I'm that noble." "Don't underestimate yourself," Linda said, her gaze locking on his. "Sometimes men don't realize the effect they have." That night, he couldn't stop thinking about her tone. The next week, he came by again, this time bringing wine to celebrate finishing the guest list. They sat on the back porch as the sky turned violet. Conversation drifted from wedding talk to loneliness, to life after loss. Linda spoke quietly, her words trembling with emotion. "I was 20 when I married Richard," she said. "I never got to be anything else. Not a woman, not an individual, just someone's wife, then someone's mother. When he died, I didn't know who I was anymore." Daniel looked at her, unsure how to respond. "You're still you," he said softly. Her eyes glistened. "Then why do I feel invisible?" The question hung between them. A drop of rain fell, then another, and within moments, the sky broke open. Linda laughed, standing as the storm drenched her hair and dress. "Guess the world's trying to tell us something," she said through the downpour. He reached for her hand to pull her inside, and didn't let go. Inside, everything blurred. The sound of thunder, the smell of rain, the soft tremor in Linda's breathing. She kissed him first. A desperate, trembling kiss that he returned before his mind caught up. When they finally pulled apart, both stood in silence, soaked, guilty, shaking. "This can't happen," Daniel said, voice low. "I know," Linda whispered. "It won't." But it did. Once became twice, twice became habit. Each encounter left them more paranoid, more careful. Meeting only when Emily was busy, exchanging brief glances at family dinners. Linda felt alive again, but also terrified. Daniel, torn between shame and desire, started drinking more, losing sleep. Every message from Linda came with both longing and dread. One evening, after another rushed goodbye, Daniel sat in his car outside her house, gripping the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. He could still feel her perfume on his hands. He wanted to confess, to Emily, to someone, but he couldn't. The weight of what he'd done settled deep in his chest. Across the window, Linda watched him leave. Her reflection stared back at her. Mascara smudged, lips trembling. She pressed her hand against the cold glass. "It's love," she whispered to no one. "It has to be." But in the darkness, her own words sounded like a lie. Neither of them knew that someone else had started to notice. A stranger's lens soon to expose the secret they thought was safe. The day of the wedding rehearsal unfolded under a golden afternoon sky. The air buzzed with chatter and music, the scent of roses drifting from the floral arrangements. Sophia Morales moved quietly among the crowd, camera in hand, her practiced eye capturing every smile, every shimmer of light that touched the faces of the soon-to-be newlyweds. She had photographed dozens of weddings before, but something about this one felt different. Tense beneath the surface, like laughter layered over unease. Emily glowed with nervous joy, holding Daniel's arm as guests adjusted decorations and rehearsed lines. Linda hovered nearby, orchestrating details with precision, always within reach of the groom. From behind her camera, Sophia noticed the way Linda's gaze followed Daniel, warm, watchful, almost possessive. At first, Sophia dismissed it. Families were complicated. Mothers got emotional. Weddings brought strange feelings to the surface. Still, as she zoomed in through her lens, moments began to catch her attention. A hand resting too long on a shoulder. A private smile exchanged during a toast rehearsal. A soft whisper near the ear that made Daniel shift uncomfortably before forcing a smile. Click, click, click. Each captured second told a story she didn't yet understand. Later that evening, after the rehearsal ended, Sophia sat alone in her small studio apartment above Main Street. The photos loaded slowly onto her laptop, filling the dimly lit room with flickers of color. She sipped her coffee, scrolling through the images, the laughter, the toasts, the dancing. And then she stopped. In one of the group photos, Daniel sat at the head table, Emily beside him, and Linda just to his left. The image was perfectly framed, until Sophia's eyes drifted lower. Under the tablecloth, barely visible between folds of fabric, Linda's hand rested firmly on Daniel's thigh. It wasn't casual. It wasn't motherly. For a long moment, Sophia stared at the screen, her breath catching. She zoomed in, heart pounding. The look on Daniel's face, frozen mid-smile, but his eyes distant, nervous, told her it wasn't a trick of the light. She leaned back, uncertain. Maybe it meant nothing. Maybe it was a reflex, a strange angle, a misread gesture. Still, her gut told her otherwise. Sophia wasn't one for gossip. Her job was to document love, not expose it. But the image felt wrong, like a secret she had accidentally uncovered. Her fingers hovered over the delete key. Click. The photo vanished. She exhaled, shutting her laptop. Some things weren't hers to see. Outside her window, thunder rumbled in the distance. A storm rolling in over the quiet town. Back at the Carter home, Linda sat alone on the edge of her bed, her phone buzzing with a message from Daniel. "We need to talk. Tomorrow." She smiled faintly, unaware that someone had already seen too much. The rehearsal dinner was supposed to be a celebration, laughter, champagne, and toasts echoing under the soft glow of chandeliers. But beneath the polished smiles and polite chatter, tension simmered like heat trapped under glass. Emily sat at the center of the long oak table, her hand intertwined with Daniel's, while Linda fluttered between guests like a hostess desperate for control. Sophia's camera clicked occasionally, catching fleeting glances and forced laughter, unaware of the storm gathering just beyond the candlelight. Daniel had barely spoken all evening. His smile was tight, mechanical, his eyes distant. Each time Emily leaned close to whisper something, His hand twitched in hers. Small tremors she tried not to notice. "You okay?" she asked softly. He looked at her, startled. "Yeah, just tired. Big day tomorrow." But his voice was hollow, and Emily felt a chill creep through her chest. Halfway through the evening, Linda motioned for Daniel to follow her. They slipped out through the side hallway that led toward the kitchen and garden terrace. Emily watched them go, confusion flickering in her eyes. Maybe they were discussing last-minute plans. Maybe her mother was fussing over table placements again. She tried to ignore the unease twisting in her stomach. Moments later, she rose to get some air. As she walked past the hall, she heard it, voices low and sharp, muffled by the wall. "Please," Linda's voice trembled. "Just end it after the wedding. That's all I'm asking." Daniel's reply came out strained. "You think it's that simple? You knew what this would do." Emily froze, the words slicing through her like glass. She stepped closer, heart pounding. Linda's tone hardened. "Don't make me the villain here, Daniel. I gave you what you wanted, affection, understanding. You said you needed someone who saw you. That was before I realized what it meant," he snapped. Silence followed. Then a sound, a choked laugh or maybe a sob. Emily's breath caught. She didn't want to believe what she was hearing. She peeked around the corner, just enough to see shadows. Linda's hand reaching for Daniel's arm, his body stiff, face turned away. "I'm begging you," Linda whispered. "Don't leave me with nothing." Emily's breath caught. She didn't want to believe what she was hearing. She peeked around the corner, just enough to see shadows. Linda's hand reaching for Daniel's arm, his body stiff, face turned away. "I'm begging you," Linda whispered. "Don't leave me with nothing." Emily stepped back before she could hear more, her mind spinning. Maybe it wasn't what it sounded like. Maybe her mother was upset about something else. She wanted to believe that. She needed to believe that. When she returned to the table, Daniel was already there, trying to compose himself. His glass shook slightly as he lifted it for a toast. Emily sat beside him, her smile brittle. "To love," he said weakly. "And to family." Linda returned a moment later, her face pale, her lipstick slightly smudged. She took her seat with the grace of a woman who had mastered the art of pretending. The evening carried on, laughter forced, clinking glasses echoing in false harmony. But Emily couldn't stop noticing the details now. The way Daniel's eyes avoided her mother's, the way Linda's hand trembled when she refilled her wine, the strained silence that lingered like a ghost between them. As the guests began to leave, Emily reached for Daniel's hand again. It trembled beneath hers. "Tomorrow," he said, his voice almost breaking. "Everything changes tomorrow." She smiled faintly, thinking he meant marriage. But the look in his eyes said otherwise, like a man counting down to a disaster he couldn't prevent. Across the room, Linda watched them, her expression soft, her eyes dark and unreadable. By the time the lights dimmed and the last guests departed, the warmth of celebration had cooled into something colder, heavier. Tomorrow wasn't going to be a wedding. It was going to be a reckoning. The reception glittered with everything Emily had ever dreamed of. White roses, golden lights, and the hum of celebration stretching late into the night. The string band played softly in the corner. Laughter rippled through the crowd, and champagne flowed like liquid gold. But beneath the beauty, something felt wrong. Daniel had been distant all evening. His smile never reached his eyes, and his laughter came seconds too late. Each time Emily turned to share a kiss or a whisper, he found an excuse to step away, to greet a guest, refill a glass, or check on the staff. Linda, meanwhile, was everywhere at once. Dancing, fussing, smiling too brightly. Yet Emily couldn't ignore how often her mother's gaze found Daniel's across the room. First, she brushed it off as nerves. Everyone was tired. Weddings were chaotic. But then it happened again. Halfway through the first dance, Daniel excused himself. Linda followed 5 minutes later. Emily noticed. So did Sophia, who lowered her camera, sensing something uneasy. When Daniel didn't return after 20 minutes, Emily's chest tightened. The guests were laughing, toasting, dancing, oblivious. She forced a smile, whispering excuses as she slipped away. Her heels clicked against the marble staircase as she made her way upstairs to the bridal suite, her wedding dress dragging softly across the floor. At the top of the stairs, faint voices reached her, muffled, frantic. Linda's voice, then Daniel's. Emily's pulse raced. She hesitated outside the suite door, her hand trembling on the handle. A sick feeling rose in her stomach, the kind she couldn't explain but couldn't ignore. She pushed the door open. Inside, the air was thick with silence, the kind that feels alive. Linda stood by the bed, her dress half-zipped, hair tangled, face pale with panic. Daniel was beside her, shirt undone, his expression frozen in horror. For a split second, no one moved. Emily's bouquet slipped from her hand. "Emily," Daniel started, stepping forward. What is this?" Her voice cracked. "Tell me this isn't what it looks like." Linda's mouth opened, but no words came out. "It's not," Daniel stammered, his voice shaking. "It just happened. Please." Emily took a step back, her heart hammering so violently she thought she might faint. "It just happened? You're my husband, Daniel, my mother." Her voice broke into a sob. "How could you?" Linda tried to move toward her. "Emily, please listen to me. It wasn't planned, I swear. I didn't mean for this." "Don't you dare," Emily hissed. "Don't you dare talk about meaning." Downstairs, the music swelled, laughter echoing faintly through the floorboards. A cruel soundtrack to the destruction unfolding above. Daniel's eyes filled with tears. "It's over, Emily. I was going to tell you after the wedding." Emily's scream cut through his words. It was raw, animalistic, tearing through the air like glass shattering. Guests below froze mid-dance. Heads turned toward the ceiling. The band faltered, confusion spreading like ripples in still water. Upstairs, Emily's sobs turned to gasps. "After the wedding? After?" She advanced toward them, grabbing the bedside lamp and hurling it against the wall. It exploded into shards. "You destroyed everything. My marriage, my family." "Emily, stop," Linda pleaded, her hands raised. "You don't understand." "Then make me understand," Emily shouted, her voice trembling with rage. "Was it worth it? Sneaking around, touching him behind my back? Did you love him, Mom?" The word mom came out like a curse. Linda's face crumpled. "I was lonely," she whispered. "You had your whole life ahead of you, and I had nothing left." Daniel buried his face in his hands. "Please, Emily, I'm sorry. I never wanted." "Shut up," she screamed. "You don't get to say sorry." Her voice cracked under the weight of betrayal. She stumbled backward, clutching her veil, tears streaking her makeup. The room spun. The floor, the bed, her mother's shaking frame, Daniel's broken face. Then, somewhere deep inside her, something snapped. Emily turned and ran. Down the hallway, past startled guests on the staircase. Her sobs echoed down the corridor as she burst back into the reception hall. The crowd fell silent. Her dress was torn, her eyes wild. Linda followed moments later, pale and frantic, shouting her daughter's name. Daniel stumbled behind her, his shirt still unbuttoned, guilt written all over him. Sophia's camera hung from her neck, forgotten. She didn't need to capture this moment. It would haunt everyone forever. The band stopped playing. The guests stared, and in the stillness that followed, Emily's trembling voice broke through the air like a knife. "You both deserve each other." She turned and fled into the night, the hem of her gown dragging through spilled wine and shattered glass. No one realized, in that moment, that blood would soon follow. The reception hall was a blur of panic and whispers as Emily's screams echoed from the stairs. Guests froze mid-conversation, champagne flutes trembling in their hands. Someone shouted her name, but she was already halfway up the staircase again, her torn veil trailing like a ghost behind her. The music had stopped. The celebration had turned into chaos. By the time a few guests reached the second floor, they found the bridal suite door wide open. Inside, the once perfect room looked like a crime scene waiting to happen. The bedspread was rumpled, clothes strewn across the floor, and Daniel stood near the dresser. Shirt still open, face pale as paper. Linda was beside him, her lipstick smudged, her eyes wide with dread. Emily stood opposite them, her white dress stained with dust and tears, the sequins catching the flickering light. Her chest heaved with every breath. "Stay away from me!" she shouted, voice raw from crying. Daniel took a step forward. "Emily, please, don't!" she screamed. "Don't come near me, Daniel. Don't you dare." Guests hesitated at the door, unsure whether to intervene. Sophia, still holding her camera, whispered to a friend, "Call security now." But before anyone could move, Emily's gaze darted toward the shattered remains of a champagne bottle on the carpet. She reached for it with trembling hands, fingers curling around the jagged glass. "Emily!" Linda cried, stepping forward. "Put that down." "Why?" Emily hissed, tears spilling down her cheeks. "So you can lie to me again? So you can both pretend nothing happened?" Daniel raised his hands slowly, voice cracking. "I made a mistake. I'm sorry. I swear. I was going to end it. After the wedding?" Emily's voice broke into a laugh that didn't sound human. "That's what you said before." She lunged. The first swing was wild, an explosion of rage and heartbreak. The broken bottle caught Daniel's shoulder, tearing through his skin. He stumbled backward, crashing into the dresser, clutching the wound as blood poured between his fingers. Gasps filled the hallway. Someone screamed. Linda ran toward her daughter, grabbing her wrist. "Stop! Emily! Stop! You're going to kill him!" "Good!" Emily shrieked, twisting free. "Let him feel what I feel." The second strike landed across Daniel's chest, slicing through fabric and flesh. He fell to his knees, gasping, his face ashen. The smell of iron filled the air, hot, metallic, unmistakable. Emily's wedding dress was no longer white. Blood sprayed across the lace, staining the satin in dark crimson patterns that looked almost deliberate. "Emily!" Linda shouted again, tears streaming down her face. She lunged forward, wrapping her arms around her daughter from behind. "Please stop, baby. This isn't you." But Emily was beyond reason. Years of trust, love, and security had collapsed into a single violent storm. She struggled against her mother's grip, screaming, sobbing, shaking. "Let me go!" she cried, thrashing. "You don't get to hold me now. Not after what you did." In the chaos, the bottle slipped from Emily's grasp and slashed across Linda's arm. A thin line of red bloomed instantly. Linda gasped, stumbling backward, pressing a hand to the wound. The sight of her mother's blood froze Emily. Her breathing slowed. The bottle clattered to the floor. For a long, heavy second, no one moved. The only sound was Daniel's ragged breathing and the distant hum of horrified whispers from the hallway. Emily stared at her mother, then at Daniel, slumped and bleeding on the floor. "What have I done?" she whispered. Linda, still holding her arm, tried to reach her. "It's okay. We'll fix this. Just give me the bottle." Emily backed away. "Don't touch me," she murmured, voice trembling. Her mascara had run down her cheeks, streaking black across pale skin. "None of this should have happened. You ruined everything." Downstairs, security guards pushed through the crowd, shoving past stunned guests. Sophia lowered her camera, hands shaking too much to film anymore. Daniel's voice came weakly from the floor. "Emily, please." But she couldn't look at him. As the guards entered, Emily turned to the window, her veil fluttering like a ghost in the night breeze. She looked almost unrecognizable, half bride, half avenger. Linda reached for her again, voice breaking. "Emily, please don't." Emily's eyes flicked toward the blood spreading across Daniel's chest. Her voice came out hollow. "He took everything from me, and you helped him." The guards rushed in just as she collapsed to her knees, sobbing uncontrollably, the broken bottle still glinting on the floor beside her. Outside, the night carried on. The distant sound of laughter from nearby streets mixed cruelly with the chaos inside the hall. As medics were called and guests ushered out, one of the servers whispered to another, They said the bride attacked him. The other shook his head slowly. No, he murmured, eyes wide as he looked toward the blood-stained doorway. That wasn't a bride anymore. In the hall below, a single champagne glass rolled off a table and shattered, its sound echoing like a bell marking the end of something sacred. The night outside the Carter estate pulsed with chaos. Red and blue lights washed over the white tents, turning the once festive wedding decorations into a grotesque kaleidoscope. Guests huddled near the stone driveway, whispering in disbelief, their laughter from an hour ago replaced by sobs and shock. Emily sat on the cold front steps, still wearing her blood-stained wedding dress. Her veil had fallen off somewhere in the confusion, her hair tangled and sticky from sweat and tears. The broken glass had been pried from her trembling hand, but she stared at her palms like she could still feel it there. Paramedics rushed past her, carrying a stretcher toward the bridal suite. Inside, Daniel Hayes lay motionless on the floor, the white carpet soaked through with his blood. His eyes were half open, glassy, unseeing. One medic pressed fingers against his neck, then exchanged a grim look with another. No pulse, he muttered. Time of death, 11:43 p.m. The other responded quietly. The words sliced through the air. Downstairs, Linda Carter let out a guttural cry, raw, animalistic, as she sank to her knees. No, Daniel, please. He can't be gone, she screamed, her voice cracking under the weight of her own guilt. Her arm, wrapped in gauze, still oozed through the bandage. Two officers held her back as she tried to run toward the stairs again. Ma'am, please, you need to stay clear, one said, his tone firm but sympathetic. Emily turned her head slightly at the sound of her mother's voice. Her face was blank, her eyes hollow. When an officer approached her, she didn't resist. Emily Carter? He said softly, crouching to meet her eye level. You're under arrest for assault and possible homicide. We need to take you in for questioning. Emily blinked slowly, as if the words had to fight through fog to reach her. I didn't mean to, she whispered. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. The officer nodded but didn't respond. He pulled her gently to her feet, the hem of her ruined gown dragging against the pavement. Flashbulbs from local reporters began popping in the distance as word spread. Bride kills groom on wedding night. Sophia Morales stood apart from the crowd, clutching her camera to her chest. Her stomach churned with guilt. Hours earlier, she deleted the photo, the one showing Linda's hand on Daniel's thigh, but the image refused to leave her mind. Now, as detectives moved through the scene, taking statements, she stepped forward. Detective? She said quietly. A tall man in a dark coat turned toward her. Yes, ma'am. I'm the photographer, she said, her voice trembling. There's something you should see. She handed over her memory card. There was a photo I deleted earlier. I recovered it from the backup. I didn't realize what it meant at the time. The detective took the card, his expression unreadable. We'll review it. Thank you for coming forward. As Sophia stepped back, she caught sight of Linda again, sitting on the ground now, hands pressed against her face. Her sobs had quieted into low, broken murmurs. My daughter, my baby girl, she whispered. I destroyed her life. Inside the ambulance, the paramedics zipped the white sheet over Daniel's face. The metallic click echoed through the night, final and merciless. Emily's gaze followed the stretcher as it was wheeled past her. I loved him, she murmured to no one in particular. He was supposed to be my forever. Her voice cracked on the last word. The officer guiding her hesitated, his eyes softening. We'll sort this out, Miss Carter, he said gently. But even he didn't believe it. As Emily was led toward the police car, Linda tried to stand but collapsed again, sobbing uncontrollably. Emily, she cried out. Please, I'm sorry. Please. Emily didn't turn around. The back door of the patrol car closed with a heavy thud. Through the glass, her reflection looked ghostly, hollowed out by the flashing red lights. Sophia watched as the ambulance pulled away, siren wailing into the distance. The crowd began to thin, but the whispers lingered. The bride. the mother, the groom, a triangle of betrayal that had ended in death. At the edge of the property, the detective pulled the recovered photo up on his tablet, the image clear, undeniable. Linda's hand rested possessively on Daniel's thigh. Both of them caught mid-laugh. He exhaled slowly, muttering under his breath, "So it's true." The night air grew colder. Rain began to fall, washing away traces of blood from the driveway, but not from memory. As the last siren faded, Sophia whispered to herself, "This wedding will never be forgotten." The hum of the fluorescent lights filled the small gray room like a pulse. Emily Carter sat motionless at the metal table, her wedding dress replaced by a thin orange jumpsuit. Her hair hung limp around her face, and dried blood streaked faintly along her forearms. The handcuffs had left red marks on her wrists. Across from her, Detective Ron Myers flipped open a folder thick with notes and photographs. For a moment he said nothing. He simply studied her. The hollow eyes, the slow blinking, the quiet tremor in her hands. Finally, he spoke. "Emily, I need you to start from the beginning. Anything you can remember. Anything at all." She stared at the table, voice soft but steady. "It wasn't supposed to be like this." Myers leaned forward slightly. "What wasn't?" Her eyes lifted toward him, glistening with exhaustion. "The wedding, my mother, Daniel, everything." He nodded. "Tell me about your mother first." Emily's gaze drifted past him, as if replaying a film only she could see. "After my dad died, she changed. She used to be this gentle, loving person, always baking, always talking about how proud she was of me. But then, it was like, she needed me to fill that empty space he left behind. I became her emotional crutch." The detective scribbled something down. "Go on." "She'd call me every night. If I didn't answer, she'd cry. She'd say I was all she had left. I felt guilty for having a life outside of her." Emily's voice quivered. "When I met Daniel, she said she was happy for me. But I could feel it, the jealousy under her smile. She'd compare us constantly. Say things like, 'He looks at you like he used to look at me.' I thought it was just her way of remembering my dad." Myers frowned. "Did you ever suspect something between your mother and Daniel before the wedding?" Emily hesitated. Her eyes dropped again. "No, not at first. He was kind to her, helpful. He'd fix things around her house, talk to her when I couldn't visit. I thought he was being supportive. But then," her voice broke. "Then, she started dressing differently, younger, flirting with him right in front of me. I told myself I was imagining it, that no mother could do that." Her breathing grew shallow. "But I saw the way he looked at her sometimes, like I wasn't even in the room." Myers closed the folder slowly. "And the night of the wedding?" Emily pressed her hands together tightly. "They disappeared. I thought maybe she was helping him with something. I went upstairs to find them and—" She stopped. Her throat tightened. "I opened the door and everything just snapped. I don't even remember grabbing the bottle. I just remember the sound it made when it broke, and her voice screaming my name." A tear rolled down her cheek. "He tried to apologize, but it was too late. They both betrayed me, the two people I loved most." The detective let the silence linger before speaking. "Emily, do you understand that Daniel is dead?" She nodded faintly. "I know. Do you feel responsible?" She hesitated again, voice barely audible. "I feel destroyed." Across the hall, in another interrogation room, Linda Carter sat hunched over, her bandaged arm resting on the table. Her mascara had run in dark streaks, and she clutched a tissue like a lifeline. Detective Hall, younger and sharper in tone, stood before her with a photo in hand. The photo. "Is this you and Daniel Hayes?" she asked. Linda's breath hitched. "Yes." "When was this taken?" 3 weeks before the wedding," Linda whispered. Hall narrowed her eyes. "You were sleeping with your daughter's fiancé." Linda flinched. "It wasn't like that. I didn't mean for it to happen." "Then tell me what it was like," the detective said flatly. Linda's voice trembled. "He came to the house to help with the seating chart. I was lonely. He was nervous about the wedding. We started talking, and it just happened. I told him it was wrong, that it could never happen again, but it did. I knew it was destroying me. I just didn't know how to stop. Hall crossed her arms. Did Emily ever find out before the wedding night? Linda shook her head. No. I thought I could keep it secret. I thought I could protect her from it. Protect her? Hall's voice sharpened. You betrayed her. Linda's tears fell freely now. You think I don't know that? I lost control. When I saw her in that dress, happy, beautiful, I realized what I'd done. I begged Daniel to end it after the wedding. I told him it had to stop, but he said he still loved her. He said he wanted to start clean. And then, her voice broke into a sob. Then she found us. Hall slid the photo across the table toward her. This picture will confirm everything. It's over, Linda. Linda pressed her face into her hands, her voice muffled and shaking. I didn't mean to hurt her. I just didn't want to be alone. In the observation room, Detective Myers stood behind the one-way glass, watching mother and daughter unravel in separate rooms. Two broken souls tied to one unforgivable act. He turned to Hall. We've got our confessions. But this isn't just a murder, he said quietly. It's a family tragedy. Hall nodded grimly. And it's far from over. The courthouse in downtown Harrisburg was packed from wall to wall. Reporters crowded the steps outside, cameras flashing as the two women at the center of the most sensational case in Pennsylvania walked through the double doors. Mother and daughter, side by side yet separated by a gulf of silence deeper than grief itself. Emily Carter, pale and gaunt from months in custody, kept her eyes on the floor. Linda followed a few paces behind, her face hidden behind dark glasses. They didn't look at each other. They hadn't since that night. Inside, the courtroom buzzed with whispers. The bride who killed her groom. The mother who seduced him. The words floated through the air like a poison that refused to dissipate. Judge Melvin Rhodes called for order as the trial began. This court will now hear the state versus Emily Carter, charged with second-degree murder, he declared, voice echoing through the chamber. The prosecution went first. District Attorney Rachel Vance stood tall, every movement sharp and deliberate. This case, she began, is about rage, betrayal, and control. Emily Carter brutally murdered Daniel Hayes on her wedding night. The evidence is clear. A weapon, multiple witnesses, and her own admission. She turned toward the jury. But beneath this tragedy lies something even darker. A mother's betrayal that lit the fuse. Linda Carter's affair with her daughter's fiancé didn't just destroy a family. It set the stage for murder. Linda's shoulders tensed, her hands trembling as Vance's words hung in the air. Emily's attorney, defense lawyer Michael Grant, rose next. He spoke with quiet gravity. Ladies and gentlemen, what happened that night was not premeditated. Emily Carter did not go upstairs intending to kill anyone. She walked in on an unspeakable betrayal. Her mother and her husband-to-be, together. In that moment, her mind shattered. This was not a cold-blooded act. This was a psychological break. Temporary insanity born of trauma. The courtroom fell silent. Emily stared blankly ahead, her lips pressed into a thin line. Witnesses took the stand one by one. Sophia Morales, the photographer, spoke softly, her eyes glistening. I saw things that made me uncomfortable, she said. Little touches, looks between Linda and Daniel. I didn't think much of it until that photo showed up on my camera. I deleted it at first because I didn't want to believe what I saw. Then came the police officers recounting the scene, the shattered glass, the blood, the screams. The paramedics described Daniel's final breaths. When it was time for Linda to testify, the entire courtroom held its breath. She walked slowly to the stand, removing her sunglasses. The makeup couldn't hide the exhaustion etched deep into her face. Mrs. Carter, the prosecutor began, you admit to having an affair with your daughter's fiancé? Linda swallowed hard. Yes. And you understand that your actions directly contributed to the events that led to his death? Tears filled her eyes. I do. Then why, Mrs. Carter? Vance pressed. Why betray your own daughter? Linda's voice broke. Because I was lonely. After my husband died, I lost myself. Daniel reminded me of the man I loved, of the life I used to have. I didn't mean to hurt Emily. I wanted to feel alive again. Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. Emily's eyes flicked toward her mother for the first time. Not with hate, but with something far more complex. Pity mixed with disbelief. Did you love Daniel? The prosecutor asked. Linda hesitated. I thought I did, she whispered. But what I felt wasn't love. It was desperation. When Emily took the stand, the room held its breath once more. She spoke softly, trembling but composed. I don't remember everything, she said. I remember walking in and seeing them. Seeing her. And something inside me broke. It was like the world disappeared. I didn't see Daniel, I didn't see my mother. I just saw betrayal. I felt like I didn't exist anymore. Her attorney asked gently, Do you blame your mother for what happened? Emily looked down, tears rolling silently. No, I blame all of us. But mostly, I blame love. The kind that blinds you until you don't recognize yourself. Even the judge seemed to pause at that. The prosecution painted Emily as violent and unstable. The defense countered with images of emotional collapse and maternal manipulation. The jury's faces betrayed their conflict. Sympathy tugged against duty. When closing statements ended, the courtroom felt heavy, suffocating. The jury was dismissed for deliberation. Hours passed. Linda sat with her head bowed, whispering silent prayers. Emily stared at the wall, detached from everything. Finally, the doors opened. The foreperson stood. We, the jury, find the defendant, Emily Carter. The pause stretched unbearably. Guilty of voluntary manslaughter. Gasps filled the room. Linda covered her mouth, sobbing. Emily closed her eyes, tears streaming freely at last. The judge spoke softly. Given the psychological evidence and the extraordinary circumstances, the court sentences the defendant to 15 years, with the possibility of parole after 8. Emily didn't react. She simply turned her head toward her mother. Their eyes met, a fragile, fleeting connection across the courtroom. Linda mouthed, I'm sorry. Emily whispered back, I know. As the bailiff led her away, cameras flashed again. Reporters shouted questions. But neither woman spoke. Because in the end, no sentence could match the punishment they'd already given each other. A lifetime of guilt, and a love twisted beyond repair. The gavel struck once, sharp as a gunshot. Emily Carter is hereby sentenced to 12 years in the State Correctional Facility for voluntary manslaughter, with eligibility for parole after 8, Judge Rhodes declared. The words hung in the courtroom air like the toll of a funeral bell. Linda Carter didn't move. She sat frozen, fingers gripping the edge of the wooden bench until her knuckles turned white. Around her, whispers rippled through the crowd. The same cruel curiosity that had followed her everywhere since the trial began. The mother who seduced her daughter's groom. The woman who ruined everything she touched. Emily stood before the judge, her posture straight but her eyes vacant. She didn't look at anyone. Not her lawyer, not the jury, not even her mother. When the bailiff approached to lead her away, she only whispered, I just wanted to stop. Linda rose on shaking legs. Your Honor, she blurted suddenly. The courtroom turned toward her. Please don't send her away. She's my daughter. She didn't mean to. The judge cut her off gently. Mrs. Carter, this court has made its decision. You may address your daughter privately if she permits. But Emily didn't permit it. Moments later, as she was escorted from the courtroom, she turned her head slightly, just enough for Linda to catch the faint shimmer of tears on her cheeks. Then she was gone, swallowed by the corridor and the sound of footsteps fading into silence. That silence became Linda's world. Weeks passed. The reporters drifted away. The house, once filled with wedding plans, laughter, and the faint scent of fresh flowers, became a mausoleum of memory. The bridal portrait that had once hung proudly in the living room now sat face down on the mantel. The stain on the carpet from that night had been scrubbed clean, yet the ghost of it lingered, impossible to erase. Every morning, Linda woke before dawn and sat at the kitchen table with a cup of untouched coffee. The ticking clock became her only company. Sometimes she would whisper aloud, as if Emily could somehow hear her through the distance. "I ruined everything, didn't I?" On the 5th week after sentencing, she drove to the state prison. The guards at the reception desk recognized her name instantly. "Carter, Linda." One read from the logbook, "You're here to visit inmate Emily Carter?" She nodded. The guard hesitated. "She's declined all visits from you, ma'am. Every request." Linda's voice trembled. "Can I at least leave her a message?" He nodded toward a small clipboard. She took the pen with shaking hands and wrote only 7 words. "I love you. I'm so sorry, Mom." The guard slid the paper into a sealed envelope and promised to deliver it. She knew he wouldn't. As she walked back to her car, the winter air bit through her coat. She paused before starting the engine and glanced at her reflection in the rearview mirror. The woman staring back at her was unrecognizable, pale, hollow-eyed, her beauty long faded beneath layers of regret. At night, the dreams came. She saw Daniel's face, smiling as he poured champagne. Then Emily's eyes, hurt, betrayed, filled with something beyond rage. Sometimes she woke up screaming, convinced she heard glass shattering again, that same sound from the bridal suite echoing in her mind. She tried writing letters, dozens of them, some filled with explanations, others with apologies. She never sent a single one. Neighbors stopped visiting. Friends stopped calling. Even the church ladies, who once left casseroles at her doorstep, stopped knocking. The whispers followed her everywhere. She stole her daughter's groom and lost her only child. One evening, Linda sat by the window, the sunset painting the sky in bruised shades of orange and red. She pressed a hand to the glass, eyes distant. "I deserve this," she murmured. "Every second of it." In the background, the TV played a news segment about prison reform. A passing mention of Emily Carter's case, her name now reduced to a headline, her story a cautionary tale. Linda turned it off and stared into the darkening reflection of her own face. "She'll never forgive me," she whispered. And maybe she shouldn't. The clock ticked past midnight, the house heavy with quiet. Somewhere far away, in a cold prison cell, her daughter lay awake too. Eyes open, staring at the ceiling, thinking of the same night that destroyed them both. 2 women bound by blood, by guilt, and by silence. 8 years had passed, but in this town, time hadn't washed anything away. It had only sealed the story in whispers. The white mansion at the edge of Maplewood Hill, once the grand Carter wedding venue, now stood like a ghost. Its shutters hanging loose, ivy crawling up the sides, and a for sale sign faded and cracked from years of neglect. A documentary crew arrived just after dawn, their van stirring dust along the long gravel driveway. The lead producer, a calm-voiced woman named Nora Pierce, stepped out with a clipboard and a camera crew trailing behind her. She had read everything, the court transcripts, the tabloids, the secret blog posts that turned the case into viral tragedy. Yet standing here, she felt something colder than curiosity. "This is where it happened," the caretaker said quietly, leading them up the broken steps. "The Carters rented the place for the wedding. No one's used it since." Inside, the air was heavy with stillness. Dust motes swirled through the sunlight seeping between torn curtains. The grand chandelier still hung above the ballroom, though half its bulbs were broken. The faint outline of where the tables once stood was visible in the scuffed floorboards. The crew set up cameras, capturing slow, haunting pans of the space. The remnants of celebration turned graveyard. Nora narrated softly as her cameraman filmed the staircase. "What began as a perfect union," she said, "ended in betrayal, blood, and silence." Locals had agreed to interviews reluctantly. At the Maplewood Cafe, an elderly waitress named June adjusted her apron as she sat before the camera. "I remember Emily," she said. "Sweet girl. Always nervous, though. Used to come here with her mama, Linda. They looked like sisters more than mother and daughter. But there was tension, you could feel it. I just didn't know it would end like that." The screen cut to another interview, a neighbor from Linda Street. Linda never came back to herself after it all. Some nights, I'd see her lights still on past midnight. Once, I heard her crying through the walls. The next shot returned to the mansion. Nora's voiceover continued as the camera drifted through the empty hall. Emily Carter served 8 years for the death of her husband. Released last month, she's refused all interviews. Her mother remains in seclusion. She paused at the foot of the stairs, the same spot where blood had once pooled, where the chaos of that night had exploded into screams. "They say time heals," Nora whispered, "but some wounds refuse to close." The sound of wind rattled the windows, followed by a soft creak from the upper floor. The crew exchanged glances. Probably just the old wood settling. One of them muttered, forcing a laugh, but Nora kept looking up, half expecting to see a flash of white fabric, the ghost of a bride forever trapped in her own tragedy. The camera lingered on a broken champagne bottle still wedged between floorboards, its label faded but legible, "Forever Yours." In post-production, Nora's narration tied it all together. A calm, chilling tone over footage of the decaying mansion. "In Maplewood," she said, "the story of the Carter wedding still lingers, not in headlines but in memory. A mother's guilt, a daughter's rage, a night that turned love into violence." The final montage unfolded in silence. The wedding arch collapsed beneath overgrown vines. A single heel, dulled by dust, resting near the door. A photograph half buried in debris. Emily in her gown, Daniel's arm around her, Linda smiling just behind them. Then came the closing line, the one that would make viewers shiver when the credits rolled. "Some vows are written in blood, not love." As the crew packed up, the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the abandoned property. Nora took one last look before leaving. Through a cracked window, she thought she saw movement. A faint silhouette of a woman standing where the altar once was, her head bowed, hands clasped as if still waiting to say "I do." When Nora blinked, the figure was gone. The door creaked shut behind her, sealing the silence once more.